Okay, welcome to our next lesson on the origins of the Holocaust. Here we're going to look at phase 2, which we will call the effects of war, and by that we mean what was the initial impact of World War II on the Jews of Germany and also the Jews located in occupied Poland. So for this period we are mostly looking at the years for this phase, we're mostly looking at the years 1939 to 1941. If you recall from our previous lesson, phase 1 incorporated the period 1933 until 1939, and for phase 1 you could also include within your discussion the material contained within Mein Kampf that Davidovitz makes reference to. For phase 3, which will be in our next class or online lecture, you will focus on 1941 alone. So today, mostly 1939 to 1941. And again, we're going to focus on the two historical interpretations, the intentionalist and the structuralist schools. The first question that we want to focus on, again, is who was responsible for the Holocaust. Think about this from both the intentional school and the structural school. And the other question, which will be part of our focus today, when was the decision made to exterminate the Jewish population of Europe? Is there any evidence from 1939 onwards that there was a premeditated plan to exterminate the Jews? The intentionalist position would opt for that idea, whereas the structuralist interpretation would argue that there was no premeditated plan, and therefore what we get is improvisation at this stage. Okay, we're going to look at the occupation of Poland and the subsequent impact that this has on the Jews within Poland. We are now talking about a much greater proportion of a Jewish population that the Nazis are going to have to deal with. By 1939 there was maybe 250,000 German Jews in the Third Reich, if you include Austria within that. Many had left before Kristallnacht, and many tried their best to leave after Kristallnacht. But when Poland is occupied, we have close to 3 million Jews now within German territory. This map here illustrates the invasion of Poland on September 1st, 1939. If you see on your left hand side, the kind of peach coloured arrows illustrate the German invasion, but you'll also note on your right hand side that the Soviet Union also invade Poland and occupy the eastern part of Poland roughly at the same time as the Germans do. We'll come back to that point in a moment. Okay, what we therefore get is World War II beginning at this point. Britain declares war on the 3rd of September in response to the German invasion of Poland. And what we're interested in is not the conventional war that's about to begin, but the Nazis' war against the Jews. So the first place that we should start for this phase is what is referred to as the Hitler prophecy quote. Now this quotation from Hitler, which I'm going to show you right here, was made on January 30th, 1939, when Hitler spoke to the Reichstag to commemorate his ascension to power, which took place January 33, on the 30th of January. Hitler here is speaking before the war begins, but he does make a statement that he will repeat again and again and again. So the statement is the quote at the top that he says to the Reichstag: "If the international Jewish financiers in and outside Europe should succeed in plunging the nations once more into a world war, then the result will not be the Bolshevizing of the earth, and thus the victory of Jewry, but the annihilation of the Jewish race in Europe." Now, first of all, you will note the contradiction from Hitler. Jewish financiers playing a part in Bolshevizing the earth. But this contradiction is present throughout much of what Hitler says and what anti-Semites within the Nazi Party state. Now, when you read this quotation, when Hitler made this statement, this very public statement, it does appear that he's threatening Jews in Europe with their complete annihilation, that they would be exterminated if war breaks out. Hitler would blame the Jews for war breaking out. Intentionalists, for obvious reasons, would seize on this quotation, on this speech, and it leads us to the intentionalist argument that war would now begin in Poland in the conventional sense, but also war against the Jews would also begin at that exact same moment. If you go to page 49 of your booklet, I should say if you do not have the booklet, there is a copy of it on the My City page, a PDF version, so you can access it. At the moment I want you to go to the page, that is page 49, that's the 49 of the numbers I've given it. It's actually page 148 of Lucy Davidovich. Remember, Davidovich is an intentionalist historian, and the section I'd like you to focus on or highlight is 3 lines down where it says war and annihilation of the Jews were interdependent. Therefore, what Davidovich is saying here is you need war, full-scale war, in order to carry out this annihilation of the Jews. Only war would allow for such a horrendous act to take place. The statement from Davidovich continues: the disorder of war would provide Hitler with the cover for the unchecked commission of murder. He needed an arena for his operations where the restraints of common codes of morality and accepted rules of warfare would not extend. This therefore was going to be a twofold war. Now if you look at the footnotes on this same page, you will see that Hitler makes this speech again in 41, he says again in 42, 42. He likes this speech, he likes this idea that he somehow was able to prophesise that war would result in the annihilation of the Jews. Quite often Hitler believed that when he initially made this statement, he thought it was on the 1st of September. He gets that wrong, but I think the reason he confuses that he maybe said it in the 1st of September 1939 is because he liked to convince himself that as soon as war began, and it begins on the 1st of September, that was also the beginning of the war against the Jews. So you might decide to return to this piece of evidence to see if it supports the intentionalist school. It might be worth noting when we study summary questions at the end of this topic, the historian Michael Maris does make the point that this was a very long speech made by Hitler, and this little rant against the Jews only lasts for a very, very short period of a much longer speech which focused more so on foreign policy and economics. By the 27th of September 1939, Poland has been defeated by the Nazis, but it's also been defeated by the Soviet Union due to the Nazi-Soviet Pact of 1939. So Poland is partitioned. This red area here, the area that is going to be encompassed into Greater Germany, is going to really be free from any Jews. These areas will eventually become part, I guess, this is the new German Reich, this is Lebensraum in action. The Jews who were located here are going to be sent to this orange area where you will see these little stars representing ghettos. And this area the Nazis called the General Government. The General Government area to some extent was a dumping ground for Jews, with maybe one intention of most Jews being located in this little area here called Lublin. The kind of beige area to your right is the territory of Poland that the Soviet Union occupied. Now the Nazi-Soviet Pact, I should say, was purely a pact of convenience for both sides. Also they were ideological enemies, and the Nazis always had the intention of, Hitler always had the intention of ultimately invading the Soviet Union. So this would be a temporary measure. The question, I guess, for historians of the Holocaust is what would be the fate of the Jews? Close to 3 million Jews who are now going to be dumped into this area known as the General Government. Would be there in the long term? Would they be there purely as a temporary measure? Okay, you can see the map a little bit bigger. Here. Okay, let's move on to the next slide. And here we want to focus on the experience of the Jews within these ghettos. Now, many of you will already have some knowledge of life of Jews in the ghettos if you've seen any movies such as Schindler's List or The Pianist. There are examples there of the Krakow ghetto and the Warsaw ghetto. Within the ghettos, life is incredibly tough, and I will kind of show you a little My City activity that will illustrate that perfectly. Jews are subjected to conditions which are close to starvation. The ghettos are to some extent a place where it's survival of the fittest, where Jews walled in Warsaw, for example, are forced to kind of make do with what was available within the ghetto, and life can be pretty tough. The Warsaw ghetto and the Krakow ghetto, I suppose, are the two of the more famous ones, but there are countless ghettos in this government or general government area. And yeah, the question is, was this a temporary measure? Did the Nazis intend to keep the Jews here? Now, intentionalists would obviously argue no to that. On My City, there are a set of questions that you will do before the next lesson. And one of the things that you will see when you get to page 59 of the chapter by Alan Farmer is a statement made by the SS man Reinhard Heydrich, who is Himmler's second in command. And this is on page 59 of the Farmer PDF on My City. And on 27th of September 1939, just as the Poles had been defeated, Heydrich stated that the deportation of the Jews to the general government has been approved by the Führer. However, the whole process is to take place over a period of 1 year. The Jews are to be brought together in ghettos in the cities in order to ensure a better chance of controlling them and later of removing them. Now, intentionalist historians would argue that the removing them would not be removing them to some other location in the east or to some other place in the world, such as Palestine, but removal would be the annihilation of the Jews. Structuralist historians would argue against this. They would say that the Nazis don't have a clear vision of what is to happen to the Jews, hence why they are being sent to Poland, they are sent to the general government area, they are being controlled, they are being monitored. Many of them will grow ill, will starve and will die in this process. So it's an incredibly cruel design that the Nazis have established here with the ghettoisation of Poland. But there is no premeditated plan, no sense of what is ultimately going to be the fate of Poland's Jews at this point. Later on within this chapter by Alan Farmer, you will read about the different ways that the ghettos were managed. There are two different ways, according to historians such as Christopher Browning, as to how the ghettos were run. One is the attritionist model, the second is the productionist model. The attritionist model was really the idea that the ghetto should just be left, and if Jews die, so be it. The productionist model, and this was a much more common approach, was to try and make the ghettos productive, and therefore members of the SS could make money from the success of basically exploiting free slave labour from Jews within the ghettos. Okay, so it's up to you again to make a decision. Do you think that the ghettoisation supports the intentional school or the structuralist school? This now takes us to the final piece of evidence that we're going to examine today, and that is the Madagascar Plan. Okay, what is the Madagascar Plan, and what historical interpretation is it more likely to support? Okay, if we accept the view that maybe the Polish ghettos were a short-term measure, as was suggested not just by Reinhard Heydrich, but also actually if you flick to page 61 as well of the Farmer chapter, in the Łódź ghetto in December 1939, Friedrich Oberloh stated that in December 1939 that the creation of the ghetto was of course only a provisional measure. I reserve for myself the decision as to the point in time and the means by which the ghetto will be cleared of Jews, The final goal, at any rate, must be to lance this festering boil. So that type of language might suggest that the Jews will be either killed or sent out of territory that is clearly going to be this Lebensraum that I mentioned. This is going to be part of the greater German Empire. There is no place for Jews in this greater German Empire. So by the time we get to 1940, when war is very much underway, the Nazis are looking for new solutions to addressing the Jewish question. And if the Jews have no long-term future in Poland, what about the idea of sending them elsewhere? That place, that location where Jews might be sent, was down here in the bottom corner of the map, Madagascar, out in the Indian Ocean. Now the idea of getting Jews from Poland to Germany, all the way past Britain, through the Channel, all the way around the west coast of Africa, and then all the way around past South Africa to Madagascar. That idea does sound fanciful, and it would be a logistical nightmare to try and take 3 million Jews from here to get them to here. The Madagascar plan was seriously considered, right? It was promoted by this member of the Jewish desk at the Foreign Office, Franz Rademacher. It went as high as Himmler and Hitler. Hitler spoke about the Madagascar plan. Sometimes Hitler spoke about the Madagascar plan even after the Holocaust was underway. Structuralists would say that this was a territorial solution. The final solution could have been a territorial solution. Intentionalist historians would say if you were to truly examine the Madagascar plan, if it was to go ahead, the ultimate goal of the Madagascar plan would not be for a new life, some type of Jewish utopia in Madagascar, but it would be the place where Jews would go to die. In fact, the extreme intentionalist historian Daniel Goldhagen would have said that Madagascar would have been a mass graveyard. Now, the plan doesn't go ahead, not for logistical problems, although there would have been many. It was because the British had not been defeated, and 1940 was a key point in the war for Germany. And because the British had not been defeated, this French island of Madagascar could not be exploited, because you could not take ships past the British. It just was not possible. So the Madagascar plan fails for that reason. Does it support the intentional school? Does it support the structuralist school? Here is a little clip that might help you decide for yourself.
And so this was the international discussion by the late 1930s, and it was then taken up during the Second World War, when Germany occupied parts of Europe, particularly France, in the summer, May, June 1940. And someone from the German Foreign Office, Franz Rademacher, then developed the Madagascar Plan as a solution for the perceived Jewish problem of Germans. Germany had occupied Poland at that stage, so they were, so to speak, responsible for several million Jews in Middle Europe, and they were wondering what to do with that. And Rademacher thought that the war would be over in a few months. So by the summer of 1940, when France was on the brink of defeat, Britain would follow soon, and then they would have the Atlantic free and could take the ships from France and ships from Britain and send about 4 million Jews to Madagascar. So every day one ship would at least go, and more than 3,000 would start to arrive on Madagascar every year. That was the plan. There was some sort of frenzy from May to August, September 1940 about the Madagascar Plan as the possible solution for the Jewish question as they saw it. What we now define as the so-called final solution, the Holocaust, only started 1 year later in the summer of 1941, after the attack on the Soviet Union. That was in June 1941. And by then the Madagascar Plan had been abandoned, and because Britain did not surrender, because the Atlantic was not open, and because the turning of the war towards the east, towards conquering Eastern Europe, the Soviet Union, was now, so to speak, the new field for a possible solution. Looking back, some people argue still today that Madagascar was, so to speak, as a possible alternative to the final solution, which we know started then in 1941. My argument would be that this is not the case. Madagascar was completely unsuitable for European settlement, and if the Madagascar plan, as it was projected in 1940, had been put into practice, the people sent to Madagascar, be it Jews or others, would have died in droves immediately, because you cannot send 3,000 people a day to an island where there is more or less nothing. There was no food, no housing, no infrastructure. There was nowhere to live, no option to survive. So the Madagascar plan, if it would have been realized, was, so to speak, an alternative of place for killing the people, and an alternative maybe of the methods of killing them, but they wouldn't have survived there either. So the argument is that Madagascar would have been an alternative to the Holocaust is just flawed.
Okay, so you can decide for yourself if you accept the view of Magnus Bredtken, and if you do, then you can also use this as evidence within your essay. So that is us finished with phase 2 with the sway presentation. What I want to do is very quickly go to the Nice City page, and if I click on phase 2, which is in chapter 4, you will see the information I was referring to from the farmer chapter, which is down here. I'll come back to that in a second. Before you get to that, there are some views here about what would be the ultimate outcome for the Jews who ended up in Madagascar. In this link here you get visual images of the horrors of the Warsaw Ghetto, and you can use these sources in your essay. Obviously you would not include the actual pictures yourself, but you can describe these images in whatever way you wish to determine if you think that the ghettoisation of the Jews and the general government supports the intentional school or the structural school. There is a view here that you can see from the intentionalist historian Daniel Goldhagen, who does believe that the conditions in the ghetto were very much a collective death sentence for the Jews. Now, a week today for the C group, and then a week on Friday for the A group, I would like you to have emailed me your answers to these questions. So you click on the link here, you'll get the Alan Farmer chapter. Remember, as you answer these questions, you are being given evidence that will support either historical interpretation. The information that you write down and that you send to me will be very much of use when it comes to writing the essay. I'll give you a bit more feedback on that in an email that I will send. So, thanks for listening, and we'll post another one of these videos for phase 3 next week.